Welcome to The Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. And guys, we're back this week with another guest that we have been so excited to bring to you guys and share their story and their insight and their perspective with you guys. He is a full-time powerlifting coach. He has massive experience on the platform, achieving a 2,000 pound total at 220 pounds, amongst many other achievements. But beyond all of that, we had the pleasure to have lunch with him earlier, and I was talking to my wife, and he is just one of the most genuine and kind human beings I've ever met. He's incredibly willing to help people, to help them grow, whether as a lifter or outside areas. And he has a great insight on what it is to be a good person who helps educate and grow others in every area. So guys, we are incredibly excited to bring you Mr. Curtis Miller.
Matt,
thanks for being here, sir.
Dude, I appreciate that.
Dude, I mean it 100%. You know what I was telling Lauren, actually, as we were walking out of the restaurant? One of the biggest things I noticed about you when we were training earlier is you were talking about, because we talked about a lot of different like weightlifting theories sure. and approaches and practices. And I was like, even like the practices that maybe you didn't 100% agree with, you never said one single negative word about another person. Like not even once, not even close to it. Like you were so willing to understand and accept that like there's different practices, different approaches. Right. There's no right or wrong way. There's generally just a way somewhere in the middle that's the best. And that really blew me away, because that's something that like, that's the type of lifestyle and mindset that we really strive for, is like, there's never reason to speak negatively of another person for something like training differences, you know?
Sure. And
so like, you can always be kind, you can always be respectful of other people. But you just did it so like naturally. Like I immediately picked up on that. I was just wondering, like, is that something you've always had, or is that something you had to build? Where does that come from?
Well, I think a lot of it's my parents.
Okay.
You know, I think that's where it started.
Yeah.
And always teaching me that there's always something to learn from somebody. Mm-hmm. And we're all going to have varying opinions, right? And when it comes to training, when I got into training, social media wasn't really a thing. YouTube had just started, but there weren't coaches putting out information like they are now. I mean, Instagram was definitely not a thing. Yeah. So you start looking at articles, you know, you're going on Elite FTS, Westside, T Nation, and you're hearing and reading a lot of differing methodologies. Every coach has their own way of coaching. And you become an open book, and you're like, the only way I can find out what's what for me is by trying it. And, you know, even if you disagree with like 90% of what some coach or some lifter is saying, there is something in that message that you can take from each one of them. And I think you just have to be open to that. I think, you know, especially now, it's flooded with information. And you don't know what's what. It's flooded with coaches, and you don't know who's who. But there is something that you can seriously learn from each person. Is even if the thing that you learn is something that you realize you don't want to do. Yeah. Or, you know, we've probably all had those bosses that we've worked for, and maybe they're not great bosses, but it teaches you how you want to be as a manager, as a leader, as a coach. So I think it's just understanding that there's something to gain from everybody, regardless of if you agree with what they say or not. Yeah,
I love that. And I really think, you know, I love that perspective, and I agree 100% with that, because I really think that if you take that perspective, like you say, even if what you learn is that something or some approach is maybe not the best way to approach things, like that's still driving you forward. That's because right. If you ever run into that same experience where you're the boss future in your life, you can think back into that and think, I remember how this was handled then, and it didn't go over great, so I'm not going to handle it that way. So it's still growing you, still driving you forward. And I think, especially in the world today, you bring up social media, you know, it's so, or at least it seems so heavily saturated because of how much we're all seeing this. Every reel we scroll through, you know, is a different perspective on how to squat. And so not only does it at least seem so saturated, but it's also so extreme generally, because extremism is what gets the views and the clicks and the likes. If somebody gets on there and says like, you can only squat wide stance, there's no other way to squat, this is the only right way, like it's gonna like cause more of some level of an emotional reaction than if you come with this balanced perspective. So it's something we get exposed to a lot, is kind of this extremism of perspective and opinion. And so that becomes then really difficult to balance, especially if you're a newer lifter, or, I mean, even now, like I've been lifting for, I said 27, so almost 8 years now. And it's still like, I feel like I am a brand new novice, like most days I walk in, because there's just so much to learn. I talk to guys like you, or like Clayton, or even Gary at the gym, who you didn't get to meet today, but he's been lifting for like 50 years. It's like, I'm just like, man, the level of insight and knowledge you guys have, it's just amazing to me. But when you especially when you're newer in the game and you see this, like, you see one video that says you have to do it this way, this is the only way to do it, and then you see the very next video, they're like, no, that is completely wrong, you have to do it this way. And I think that gets really confusing, and it can get disheartening for people, especially newer people to the sport, or even just the gym in general. So like, what's some of your advice for people on how you can get a little more balanced of a perspective and keep yourself from going down that mental anguish of seeing all these extreme opinions?
Well, one of the things, and part of me doesn't want to say this right now because my profession is a coach. Yeah. And, I'm always looking for people who I can help. However, I think that there's more people that need to not rely on a coach when they first start. Now, a lot of people disagree with that. They say, hey, because there are an abundance of coaches, and this may not be something that you want to do forever, get a coach right from the jump. Teach you what you need to learn. Well, unfortunately, there's so many coaches that you don't even know if the information you're getting when you first start is the information that's best for you. So, and from personal experience, like I said, when I first started lifting, online coaches weren't a thing. And we would read articles. And the way that we learned, I would read an Elite FTS article every night before I went to bed. And then we would go into the gym the next day. And I had a couple training partners, and we'd say, hey, what are we doing today? And I'd be like, hey, well, I read this last night. Let's try it. And you do that long enough, and you're really going to start learning what's best for you. So if you do that, then you can differentiate, and you can kind of sift through the information and kind of take what you think would be best applied to what you've already learned about yourself. Whereas if you're starting out and you instantly get a coach, well, you're going to rely on that coach. So if the day comes when you don't have a coach anymore, what are you going to do? And I'm, the gym where I train at Union Fitness in Pittsburgh, I helped manage a place for 4 years, and you get a lot of younger lifters that come in there, college lifters. And from day one, they had somebody coaching them. And I always ask them, like, what would you do if you didn't have a coach? How would you train? How would you program? And they're like, I don't know. I'd probably get another coach. Well, we don't really want that, right? We want to be able to figure things out on our own. And I think what it comes down to is more people need to rely on themselves. And the information from social media is great, but there's so much. There's so much now that it's overwhelming what to choose and what to apply. So yes, in a way that's very similar to how I started, but there weren't an overwhelming abundance of resources. It was just a couple. Like, you're reading a couple books, you're reading a couple articles. So I think you got to get more comfortable with yourself.
I really like that answer. I like that approach too, because I think back to when I very first started, and I got into lifting not actually even to get strong or to even get in shape. Like, it was purely to deal with a lot of the undealt things that I had in my life, to get out of alcoholism, to get into something more healthy, to help have something to challenge myself against that was actually beneficial to myself. But I quickly got very absorbed by it, and it quickly became one of my greatest passions in life. And I remember I wasn't into I didn't do magazines and articles, but I think when I was getting into it, it was 2017, 2018. So YouTube was a little more established. I think Instagram was a little more established, but I was never even on I don't think I was ever even on Instagram for several years back there. Like it was all YouTube based, but I had like 3 guys I'd watch. It was Mark Bell, Eddie Cohn, and Stan Efferding.
Yep.
Like those were my 3 guys. And what's interesting is like even amongst, they did a lot of collaboration together, but even amongst the 3, they had very different techniques and approaches. But what I guess thinking about it now, that like they would all approach it from a very long form perspective. Like these YouTube videos are 20 to 40 minutes long. That's right. And I think it'd be very hard to be incredibly extremist amongst that kind of time horizon. So I think one of the big challenges now as you get on like Instagram or TikTok, our attention window is just shrinking shorter and shorter and shorter. Because I remember like the highlights of my week would be like Tuesdays when a Mark Bell video dropped, or Thursdays when a Stan Efferding video dropped.
And you're listening to the whole thing when you're driving to the gym.
Right now.
in the parking lot before you go in.
And then I'm going to sit and listen to it again later while I'm eating dinner, you know. But it's like 20 to 40 minutes. So you're getting like this massive range of perspective within it. And that's a big enough time frame to explain a lot of the nuance and the pluses and the minuses and who this might work for, who this might not work for, you know, why you might want to do this, why you might want to try something else. But you get on Instagram or TikTok and in 30 to 90 seconds, you cannot even remotely explain that nuance. No. You can't, but extremism is very easy to explain.
That's right.
You know, and people have gotten very clever at creating very concise and defined arguments that if your entire perspective of a squat is just this 90-second video of this, like, you can only do it this way, it's going to be hard to question that.
That's right.
So yeah, that's got to be a really good balance. But I like what you said about when I got into lifting outside of watching those YouTube videos, it was literally like, I still remember that day because I'd gotten into the school I was at. There were kind of 2 gyms there. There was one side of it that just had like weight machines and cardio. And I did that for like 3 months, probably just the weight machines, because I could figure out how to use them. I had no idea how to go in and like use a barbell or like, it's wild for me to think back now, but I remember being so terrified the first time I stepped into that free weight gym and I tried to bench. I think I benched like 75 pounds or something. Same. But I had like no idea what I was doing. But it was literally just me going in and figuring it out, figuring out my body, figuring out my strength, figuring out the physics of it all. And, you know, so much of my joy in those early years was just from the process of figuring things out kind of on my own with the help of some of those videos. So I think you're 100% right. I think especially for younger people who have, you know, so long to chase greatness, I think that's a really great way to get into it, because you learn not only do you like learn how to train, but you learn so much about yourself that if you have a coach pushing you in any one defined specific direction, it may keep you from learning who you are as a lifter.
100%.
Yeah.
Because, and going back to something you said about, you know, short videos versus those long form, like, you know, Stan and Ed and Mark. When you're listening to something that long, they're rarely talking in absolutes or yes or no's. There's a lot of in-betweens. There's a lot of, well, it depends. When you're watching a lot of stuff on social media right now, the short clips, it's either do it this way or don't do it this way. But that's not what any of this is about. Yeah. Becoming the best lifter, becoming the best person, there's a lot of gray area and in between and happy mediums. And that's what we need to really get back to thinking about. Because I can tell you that one of the biggest reasons why I was able to progress as well as I was is because I was always saying, well, this is helping me and I'm going to continue to do it. But what if I applied something from this side of the spectrum as well? And you start meshing ideas and concepts, and then you're like, oh shit, I think I'm onto something here. You know, but if I were to say, well, no, that's not going to work, I need to keep doing this, I think about how much I would have limited my potential and my progress over time.
Yeah.
You know,
because one of the most basic fundamental facts of like all of training and just even beyond training, but to physiology in general, is the body responds to stimulus and it responds more quickly and more readily to a less well-known stimulus. So like, you know, you think back to like the newbie gains, like when your first couple days in the gym, you are going to be hurting.
Oh, yeah.
And if somebody's like trying to put on muscle mass or strength, they'll generally gain more in the first year or two than they'll gain at a quicker rate in the first year or two than they do for the next 10 years,
That's right.
However long. So I think it makes sense to, switch things up, try new things. And we'll get into this later, but I know you were talking about how you've been switching up your training style, specifically focusing on things you're not used to doing to help build yourself stronger. But I think that makes so much sense because that's a totally new stimulus. You're going to get a way stronger response, physiologically speaking, than if you just kept doing the same thing you've always done.
That's right.
And so I think, we can blend these worlds of like progressive overload and conjugate, like they can come together, things like that.
As you should.
Yeah. Yeah. But I want to take it back a little bit just so people can learn more about you as an athlete and as a coach. You said you grew up in Maryland, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, small town, Denton.
Okay.
More specifically, I grew up in a town, I guess it's a town, Hickman was the name of the place.
That's great.
So, farmland everywhere, out in the country, flat roads, straight. Recently, a lot of my training partners and some of my clients, we did a meet down there.
Oh, nice.
And when I was growing up, when I was into powerlifting, there weren't really meets on the Eastern Shore because there weren't a lot of gyms. But, recently there's been a couple gyms opening up and some meet directors, Travis Rogers, he has a gym down there and he runs some really good meets. So we went down there as a crew and they're like, where the hell are we at? They're like, it is so flat, so spread out. And that's where I grew up. And I loved it. It was very peaceful. And it taught me to take things a little slower and, take things one step at a time. Whereas, being up here in Pittsburgh for the last 5-6 years, I find myself constantly sped up. And luckily I can go back home and slow down a little bit. And, growing up, my parents always kind of let me be exposed to whatever I might be interested in. They never really limited me or limited my potential, or I always felt like I could kind of accomplish whatever I really set out to do. I played soccer and baseball from as early as 4 years old. I played those all the way up until the end of high school. And even after high school, when I was in college, I got into men's softball. And like not slow pitch softball. It's called modified softball. A little more intense, you get some balls thrown at your head when you're up to bat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Those are the big ones too, right?
Yeah,
like
for
it's
sure.
Not like,
yeah. But, during that time I was around 19 and that's when I first got into lifting. That's when I really first found my way into the gym, because when I was in high school, our coaches, the sport coaches for soccer and baseball, never really wanted us working out. Or if they did, they never really encouraged it. It's kind of that old school mindset. Like,
I remember hearing that growing up, this like, you can't lift weights when you're young because it's going to mess up your joints and all these things.
Well, and they were, they believe that the skill of being on the field was how you got better. But the football coach, the football players were always in the weight room.
Yeah.
And the football coaches were the history teachers. And my history teacher, this is just a funny story. Mr. Joseph, if you're listening, I appreciate it. My first day in the weight room, I was graduated high school. And I'm in there and I'm doing lat pull downs because I didn't know how to do anything else. Right? you go to this big machine and you just pull down on this bar, right? And I'm doing it. And he comes in and it felt like it was a scene from a movie. Like the music went skirt and he's like, Miller, what the hell are you doing here? Are you lost? And I was 145 pounds. Yeah. And I was like, damn, I think I am lost, but I just kept coming back. Yeah. And I imagine what would have happened if I just let that get to me. Yeah. And, I kept coming back. And then I had a couple guys that would come in and they would train with me for a little bit. And I started helping them. And although I loved making myself better, I realized that what I loved the most about it was being able to learn things and give that to help somebody else. And then after about a year of doing that, I told my sister, I was like, hey, I think I want to go back to school for something different. Because I originally went to college to build street rods and muscle cars.
Oh, really?
I was going to...
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I was going to... Straight out of high school, I went to college in Blairsville, Pennsylvania, called Wyotech. And it was a little over a year, and it was like collision refinishing, street rod custom fabrication. And that was in 2007, 2008. And when I got out, I worked at a couple shops, but they were closing down because the economy got really, really bad. Yeah. People couldn't pay to, have their cars fixed. So that's when I started training, and I told my sister, like, hey, I think this is something I want to do. And she said, go back to school now, especially if you love it, because she was essentially a single mom that really helped. I mean, she was working multiple jobs, raised my niece on her own, and she graduated from college when she was like 30 as a nurse. Okay. And she was like, don't wait, do it now. Mm-hmm. So that's when I went back to school, and man, I absolutely fell in love with it. That's when I got into powerlifting and just really realized that my main passion and purpose was helping other people. Yeah. More so than myself. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's awesome. So you had that calling from a pretty young age then. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What, and that's interesting because it's like you started noticing that very, mm-hmm. very early on. Is that something you think has kind of been with you from almost your whole life, or is that something that really just kind of awakened you, discovered when you got into training and helping other people?
Man, you know what? Growing up, my parents, I saw them help so many people, specifically my dad. And my dad's been through a lot. And I saw him help so many people and pass on all the things that he had learned from others who had helped him, and getting through the things that he got through, and seeing him help all those people made me realize, like, that's where it's at. Yeah. Like that's special, because in a world that seems so crazy, it seems like it's hard to find people who you can count on to help you. And it's hard to meet people that, are super, super genuine people that will give you the shirt off their back. And when you do, it's special, and you want to hold on to those relationships. Yeah. And I think those relationships just make us tick and keep us always wanting to be better people. And I realized that as I was helping other people and watching them grow and achieve their goals and maybe help them get through hard times, that it was helping me get through my own hard times. And, when we were talking about lifting earlier, I always wanted to lift more weights, and I wanted to total this and hit that. But at the end of the day, it was more about the people that I was training with, and it was more about helping everybody else. Being stronger and being able to compete was just icing on the cake. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think it comes back to, watching my parents and learning from other people.
Yeah. We talk a lot about finding purpose, or creating purpose, as we like to say on the show. We talk about that a lot, creating purpose for your life and finding passion in your life, because ultimately we believe that's like the main solution for a lot of these challenges that mm-hmm. we can face, mm-hmm. Especially where Austin and I have been in different points of our life. For me, it was purely a loss of purpose. Mm-hmm. When I was 18 years old and got put in a position where I'm fighting for my life every single day, and then all of a sudden that goes away, it like sent me into a big spiral. It's like, How do I find that same level of purpose and passion again? And I think, like what we were talking about earlier, it's got to be something more than just yourself.
That's right.
I don't think anybody will ever be fully fulfilled if it's just confined to themselves.
That's right.
Because it's an infinite game, mm-hmm. And you can always chase bigger numbers. You can always chase, more reps or PRs or whatever it is. But it's not always something you can actually achieve. Mm-hmm. Like we'll all hit a point where we hit our last PR, that's right. Like that's just how life works. It's part of life. Yet when you get into these infinite games, like Alex Hormozy, he's a big proponent of this. Mm-hmm. You get into these infinite games, like coaching people, helping people. Like there's no limit to that. Mm-hmm. Like you can do that till the day you die. Like you can do that till you're 80, 90 years old.
That's right.
You can always provide that value and that insight and help build others up. There's always more to do in that area. So it's a purpose that will never fade or never go away. And I think that specifically like service to others, there's not really a higher calling than that. I think like you said, we kind of run that way. We're designed that way. Even if you think back to how we used to survive in more like tribal times, you know, we were all designed to be able to grow together, build together, and lift each other up. And so I think we still have a lot of neurochemistry that is wired that way. And when we get in isolation and get outside of that, it can cause a lot of internal challenges. So I think that's a huge piece, and I'm glad that you've been able to find that for your life. And you talk a lot about how it came from your dad and your parents. But I know you've mentioned your dad a couple times now since we've been together, and it seems like it's definitely been a very powerful relationship for you. What's some of the greatest things you learned from your dad?
Man, it's funny. You know how relationships go with your parents growing up.
Oh yeah.
We don't have enough time for that. But you know, you go through this stage when you're younger, and they're the strongest people in the world, and they're the smartest people in the world, and you think they're superheroes, and then you become a teenager, and you're like, you guys get on my damn nerves.
You don't know anything.
And then you get to the point, like for me, when I moved to Pittsburgh is when I really became best friends with my parents. And my dad and I were very, very similar. So when I was growing up, we butted heads a lot. And, you know, we still did everything together, you know, played baseball. We had a 1970 Mustang. We got that when I was 10 or 11, and we worked on that together. And that helped bring us together. But it was a tough, but it was a great relationship. But the things that I learned the most from him, I've never to this day heard that man complain about anything, because the way he grew up on a farm and on a sawmill, and he had to work on the family farm, and it was what was absolutely required. And all I've ever seen him do is work. And now that he's retired, I've seen him take a little step back, but Dad, I see you always finding things to do around the house that don't need to be done. And I've told him this, but hard work, and the fact that like sometimes when you're working really hard and it seems like you're not getting anywhere, it's like, just keep moving, just keep working. Don't think that something's not going to happen just because you don't see it happening, because it's going to open up another door. So he taught me the value of that. He taught me the value of gaining knowledge from other people, because everybody has something very valuable that they possess. And it's not that we want to use people, but we want to listen to people. And that's a skill that I think is kind of going by the wayside now. You know, it's like you and I have learned so much just from talking to each other over the past few hours of being here today. Right.
Yeah. 100%.
But we're also listening and hearing what each other have to say. And that's something that I think you don't see that much anymore. So, those are a couple things, hard work, your family. That's a big thing. We're both family men. Yeah. But chasing your goals, and you can, and he never limited, and my mom too. My mom, they never limited anything for me. Like if I said, "Hey, I want to try this," they're like, "Yeah, try it," And I just always felt like I could achieve a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, because I think that's something that is also not super common these days. You see a lot of, and I never judge anybody else's parenting style or how they, navigate that whole world themselves. But I do see it quite frequently where, there's a lot of parents these days where kids, they will kind of shield or shelter their kids because again, in this world of social media and everything else, you're just more exposed to all of the extremes of these potential dangers out there. And I think it comes in from a protective mechanism primarily, but I've always felt that if there's one thing I could ever do for my daughter, it would be to instill the belief in her that she can achieve anything she wants.
That's right.
Like that is my number one goal as a father, because if she can do that, if she can just have that belief, she can apply that to anything she wants to chase in life. And hopefully, be able to work through and overcome the fear and the barriers as they come up, because those are always there too.
And you're gonna fail.
Yeah,
you're gonna run into roadblocks, but it's that belief that you keep working, you keep chipping away, and it opens doors everywhere else.
Yeah, 100%. Because if you've got that belief strong enough within you, you're gonna know there's another way. That if you just keep going, if you just keep working, if you just keep up that hard work, you'll eventually overcome that. You'll move past that, and there will be things in the future that you couldn't even dream of.
That's right.
Yeah. So I love that. So going back to when you first discovered this like passion and love for serving others that eventually led into this passion for coaching, what was it specifically that drew you to powerlifting as opposed to going down like the football route or anything like that?
So, like I said, I had never walked foot into a gym for a very long time. And then my friend at the time, I had just lost my job. I was working in a body shop, and he was like, "Hey man, let's just go to the gym." I was like, "Dude, I don't know what to do at a gym." And he's like, "We're gonna bench press. We're gonna do some lat pull downs."
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, I've seen people bench press. Let's give it a shot." So we go in there, and we went for a couple weeks, and then he was in a really bad car accident and almost lost his life. And I told myself I was going to keep going to the gym for him. And through that time, I was going through different things in my life. And it just kept me going. But I was kind of, I was reading like muscle and fitness magazines. I was doing a little bit more like bodybuilding style workouts. And I still had that competitive edge from playing sports growing up that wasn't fulfilled. Yeah. Because you could go in and just hit workouts and feel good. But it's like, what am I doing with this? And that's when I stumbled upon a Powerlifting USA magazine. And I was like, what is this stuff? Because I had watched Strongman growing up, World's Strongest Man on TV, right? Yeah. But it was after the time that powerlifting was on TV. Powerlifting was on TV in like late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, I didn't realize it ever was on TV.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Ed Cohn and those guys.
Okay.
But that was before I found powerlifting. So when I saw this magazine, I was like, let's give this a shot. And the first article I ever read was about squatting with bands.
Okay.
And I'm like, man, where do I get these rubber bands? Yeah. So I type in resistance bands in Google, and it took me to Elite FTS.
Oh, nice.
And they got all the bands. And I'm like, well, shit, now there's like 500 different band tensions. What do I get? So I picked the ones right in the middle, right? The light orange ones.
You can go straight for the mammoth bands.
Yeah, right. So I get them and I start applying them to everything I was doing. Now I was still like bodybuilding training at the time, but I was putting bands on everything I was doing, whether it was squatting, benching, deadlifting, whatever. But I was hitting like sets at 8 to 10, and then there was a guy, this is what really sealed it. Guy from Oregon or Washington State, Dan Hernandez, old school powerlifter. He moved down to the Eastern Shore and started training at a small YMCA where we were training. And I mean, they didn't have music in the gym. They had one flimsy squat rack and one bench press. No dedicated deadlift area. So we would get yelled at all the time for deadlifting, right?
That's awesome.
But I'm in there and I'm just messing around, and I see him come in. He had a West Side barbell shirt on. Yeah. And I was like, I've seen that shirt. I've heard of West Side. I read some of their stuff. And I see him lift, and he's inclining 315. He was built like a bowling ball, right? But you could tell he was strong. He was built different than anybody I'd ever seen. Mm-hmm. And I saw him unrack 315 on the incline, and he's going down so slow. And I'm like, oh, this guy's about to die. I need to go pick this weight up off of him. And he goes, burp, and he just throws it through the ceiling. And I was like, that was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. I'd never seen anybody move weight like that before. And I go up and I was like, I'm Curtis Miller. And he told me his name. And I said, I like your shirt. He goes, oh, you know about West Side? And I was like, yeah.
Like all about it.
I know everything, right?
Me and Louie go way back.
Yeah, exactly. And he goes, meet me here tomorrow at 4 p.m. And I was like, what did I just get myself into, right? So I come back the next day, and he goes, here, try this on. And it was a Katana bench shirt.
Oh, okay.
Right? And I'd never seen bench shirts before. And I think at the time my max bench press was like 245. Right. And he's like, we're going to do max effort benching today. And I was like, I think I've heard of max effort benching. I know we're going to go heavy.
Yeah.
So he puts the shirt on me, and then we do reverse bands, and we're doing like a 2-board press. So I ended up working, I think I worked up to like 400.
Jeez. That's great when you've never held more than like 245.
Yeah, which is like 1,000,000% over what I ever.
Yeah.
And we went set after set after set.
Oh man.
And I actually got sick the rest of that week. my body was just like, we can't handle this.
Yeah.
And then finally after that week, I was like, dude, this is it. This is what I need.
Yeah.
And so we trained with him for a while, and he kind of showed us the ropes. And there were only 2 of us at this point. It was me and my buddy Tyler, who was my original training partner. And we would train with Dan like every day. And after that, I was like, hey, I want to do a meet.
Yeah.
But I knew nothing about meat. So all I would do is research. You know, I watched videos, read articles on what goes into a powerlifting meet, how to prepare. And I just kind of put together my own concept of preparing for a meet. And that's once that first time I stepped foot on the platform, man, dude, you couldn't take me away from it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's hard to replicate that feeling of being on the platform and like everything is bare. Cause one of the greatest things I tell people is one of the greatest things about powerlifting is like the numbers don't lie. And whether that's on a platform or whether it's like personal, it's like just in training, it's like, if you lifted that weight, you lifted that weight.
That's right.
Now you can get into all the weeds as we will a little bit later on all the like judging protocols and the differences there and the subjective. But like for example, for you, like you had 815 pounds on your back and you squatted it. Like that's something nobody can ever take away from you. Like whether it's called a good lift or a bad lift or whatever, like I've always just seen it as like that's something you did. Like, and whether you get white lights or red lights, it doesn't change anything about the fact of what you went out and accomplished. And to me, that just like, that lights me up like so much. But that's awesome to hear, like that story of getting into the gym. Like that's
a lot of people don't even know that story.
Oh my gosh. That's just what the fact that like you just happened to meet him. And what's even crazier about it is that group we squatted with this morning. That's almost exactly how they started. They started in a YMCA and no music. And they just had this, like, I've seen videos from back then and it's just wild. They had this little flimsy squat rack that they'd be sitting there squatting 500 or 600 pounds out of, and everybody else in the gym is just mortified.
Yeah. You know? Right.
But it's wild. We
would have a lot of complaints too.
Really?
But then I started working there.
Okay.
So I started working front desk. I started doing personal training, and I got to meet a lot of the members. And they realized like I was just a normal kid. You know, this is just something I like doing for fun, and I didn't mean any harm, and it didn't mean I was an asshole.
Yeah,
I was just pushing myself and challenging myself.
100%.
So they started to understand that even though it was strange to them, you know, it was fun for us.
Oh, 100%. And that's why I kind of hated it. It was, gosh, it's probably was about that time frame when Planet Fitness was doing their marketing campaign about like pick things up, put things down. You know, it just kind of gave that like more intense serious lifter a really bad impression, really bad rap. But I tell people all the time, I was like, the best people you can ever be around are some of the most serious lifters. Because they're going to understand so much nuance. They're going to understand so much about themselves. Like especially in a gym atmosphere, like they're going to be like some of your more dedicated, serious, experienced lifters are going to be so much more considerate of like your time and your space and what you're trying to do than a lot of people that you'll find in a lot more, you know, commercial public type areas.
That's right.
Yeah, I believe that fully. And we've had some people on the podcast, you know, say that kind of stuff before. So I think it's just, you know, once you start to get into those worlds and you understand what's behind all of that passion that you see up front, I think it really opens your eyes to a lot of what can be there.
Right.
And it's awesome you had that experience so early on in your career. So when was this that you would have done that first meet?
2013.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was 23.
Okay.
And it was an RPS meet. and there weren't really any other federations that were doing meets within driving distance.
Okay.
Like USPA wasn't over here on the East Coast yet, because Steve Dennison started that out on the West Coast. That was more of like a California thing. And then it came over afterwards. But there were USAPL meets, and then there was RPS. So we would travel to Eastern PA, New Jersey, mainly to do our meets. And it was such an awesome experience, man. It was serious, but the first thing I noticed were people that didn't even know each other were helping each other.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize about powerlifting. You know, you meet people that are in your weight class that you're competing against, and you're helping them. You're cheering them on, right? And I never really quite experienced that before in any sports that I had played. And that's, I think, another thing that really got me hooked and really kept me coming back. And then luckily with social media, you can keep in touch with these people a lot easier. So you're seeing their progress. They're seeing your progress. Then a couple years later, you go to another meet and they're there and you're like, dude, you've been killing it, you know? And it also elevates you. You know, it shows you what's possible and what you can be capable of. So yeah, it started in 2013. And, you know, this past October was the last one, at least for the foreseeable future, that I'm going to do. You know, maybe if my daughter grows up and she wants to try a meet, maybe I'll jump in. Yeah. Who knows? I might be better then than I ever was before.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like that daughter, we were talking about it, you know, having.
Dude, the meets that I've done before Lily and the meets I've done after Lily, it's just like
it's wild.
There's a big difference.
It's wild. Yeah.
Oh man. And I can't wait to get into this part of things. I mean, we can go ahead and talk about it because it's something that you and I are very aligned in our perspectives right now, just in the sense that your daughter was born, I think like 3 weeks before mine was.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of in this phase of life, kind of like together almost, you know, because it's just wild how many similarities we saw when we were talking at lunch today about it's just how they hit these points where they just like develop and you see so much in them. I've definitely been wanting to ask you and talk to you about just like what your experience has been like being a father. I know your parents have been so crucial in your development in life, and now you get to experience this yourself as a parent. Like what's all that meant to you?
I think the biggest thing is, I mean, it makes you step up so much, right? Like before, especially when I was competing, I was doing it for myself. I was doing it for myself, and I knew that competing was going to help me get to another level professionally. And I think looking back, that was a big reason why I wanted to be as good as I did, is because I knew it was going to let me build connections, gain experience, build my resume, so I could meet more people, help more people, and be able to do it for a living. Yeah. And that's how I was using it. So in a way, that's a selfish approach, but selfish doesn't have to mean a bad thing.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Right. Like because ultimately you're doing it so that you can build that network and grow as a coach, so you can help other people.
That's
like
right.
You're going to create that full circle.
Yeah.
You know, you're not chasing it for your own fame or notoriety. It's so that you can give everything that you build back to others. Yeah,
and then I think one thing that I realize now that maybe I knew back then, but I wasn't focusing on it, is by doing that, being able to start my business, then starting a family, it was going to allow me to do things with my family that I wouldn't have normally been able to do if I was, say, running a gym. Yeah. You know, so now I get to watch her 3 days a week when my wife goes to work. And although it's challenging, you know, it's tough, but I get to watch my daughter 3 days a week, 8 hours a day, you know, and I get to sit down, I get to make her breakfast and eat breakfast with her. I get to eat lunch with her. I get to play on the floor with her, and nothing else matters. And that's something that I would not have been able to do without going through the sacrifices that I did, without pushing myself as hard as I did, without doing all those meets, building a reputation. That's something I couldn't be able to do right now. And now what my focus is, when I decided that I wanted to do another meet after she was born, it was knowing that she wasn't going to know a damn difference once she got older. She's not going to remember it. She was like 4 months old at the time, right? But it was also me wanting to push myself so that I can gain this type of strength to be able to show her that she can do it too. Even though, she was at my last meet, and that was really cool. And even though she didn't know what was going on, she's not going to remember it. It was knowing that I'm doing something that I can pass on to her and give her those lessons so that she can be her own person and that she can be strong in whatever way that she wants to be strong. And that's what it means to me now.
100%, because they don't have to remember it for it to have impact on them. When infants are that young, they are, like we talked about stimulus earlier. Infants are receiving the ultimate stimulus because every single thing they do is
right.
brand new. Every single thing they see is brand new. Everything they feel, every experience for them is brand new. So it is the world of hyper stimulus, and it's every single one of those is shaping and affecting who they are. And I even fully of the belief that even just her being there and feeling, some of those emotions and having being witness to some of those experiences, like that's going to help shape her neurochemistry in some way. And there is so much we do not understand about the brain and neurochemistry and how everything all interplays together. But I'm fascinated by it because, and we can dive into this conversation later, but to me, I've always viewed my greatest strength as an athlete as actually my mind, more than any aspect of my body. And so I'm always fascinated by how do you leverage the mind in some of these situations where you're faced with impossible situations in front of you, but I know that the mind is always being shaped and molded by the things we expose ourselves to and the things we're around. And so, especially when they're that young and, she doesn't even have to remember it. The fact that she got a chance to witness you going out and not just witnessing your physical strength, but witnessing the amount of mental, spiritual, and emotional strength it takes to put yourself on the line in such a manner. Like that's something that I believe will be impactful for her for the rest of her life. And so, when you give her something like that, like there's just no greater gift. There's no better feeling as a father.
And the other cool thing is, when I met my wife, she was getting into her first 2 bodybuilding shows.
Oh, wow.
So she did 2 bodybuilding shows. Then a couple weeks later, she ran a half marathon.
Holy crap.
And then a few months after that, she told me she wanted to do her first powerlifting meet. So she's done three or four powerlifting meets. And then within the last couple of years, she's done 2 strongman competitions.
Holy cow.
And she wants to eventually do another strongman competition. And, the days that I watch my daughter, when my wife gets home, I go to the gym and my wife will go down in the basement and she'll just prop up my daughter and she'll train. Yeah. And there's these videos and they mean so much to me, but my daughter is just sitting there and she's just staring at my wife, like deadlifting. Right. And it's like, I just want to know what she's thinking about. But one day she's going to be old enough to comprehend that her mom is one of the strongest people on the planet and the strongest person that she'll ever know. Yeah. And just seeing her watch my wife lift is just so, so special. So regardless of if she wants to get into lifting weights or not, she can go play chess. I don't care, but I just want her to find something and be very, very passionate about it and driven and just fall in love with it,
And strength can manifest in an infinite number of ways too. But her being able to see that now, it's like see strength in front of her is going to be so impactful for her. Because on the contrary, like your wife could, just be sitting down watching TV or whatever, and your daughter would see that as well, but they're sending 2 very, not that watching TV is bad or wrong or anything, but the fact that she gets the opportunity on a daily and weekly basis to be able to witness like pure strength, like in this form, but it can be in any form. Like that is so, I believe that is just so profoundly impactful to their development and their growth, and what's going to ultimately build them into being able to have that belief in them that they can be strong, they can go out and work hard and achieve these things. Like that, I think, is the greatest gift you can give, because now that they're old enough to actually, you can see some of that emotion in their face. Like that's some of the cool, and that was something I was not, I never really got to be around a lot of babies when I was growing up. So it's a lot of this is like totally new for, like, Lauren is just like a complete expert at it, and everything I know about being a parent, I've learned so much from her. Like it's mind blowing to me. Like this has always been her biggest passion in life, is to be a mom and to be a good mom. And seeing her getting to like execute that is just one of the greatest things I've ever gotten to witness,
and that's
in my
strength.
whole life. Oh,
you know, you're talking about, that's awesome.
Because she will, like, our daughter, I love her to death, but she does not sleep.
Yeah.
Dude. You know, she wants to just eat all night long. And
I felt that,
you know, like she's primarily breastfed. So it's like, you know, I feel guilty a lot of times, but there's just not a lot I can do in some of those situations at night. You know, I take that back. There's a lot you can do to support your partner, for sure.
That's right.
I agree with that 100%, but there's not, like, I can't physically feed her in the way Lauren can. So, you know, but Lauren is just like, she is up with her night after night, hours at a time, and never once have I heard her complain about it. Every morning she wakes up and talks to that baby like it's the greatest gift she's ever received.
Because it is.
Yeah.
That's, you know,
and especially with, you know, I've talked with her about it a couple times, but I would love to be able to bring her story onto this show someday, just to be able to show people what she went through in some of the cases. Because I mentioned to you, we had to do IVF. What some of the things I've seen her face and go throughout this journey was just, it's still like, I don't even understand how a human being can go through some of those things and still come out as strong as she is. And so I just have so much admiration and respect for her as a mother and as a human being. And I think that's another cool piece about it. You get to see your partner in this whole new light too.
It brings you closer.
Yeah, it really does, because you get this, I don't want to call it a challenge, but you get this like whole new part of your life that you get to work on and build together.
That's right.
And you have to adapt to a lot of these situations. Like, how do I go out and train? How do I coach? And it's interesting, you talk about like getting to be with your daughter and getting to watch her 3 days a week. Like, that's an amazing gift. And it's so cool, because a lot of I have some really close friends that I talk to that don't have kids yet. And so I forget who it was I was talking to, but the other day I told him it's wild. It's like, when I'm watching her, when I'm with her, she consumes every like part of who I am. I am putting all of my attention, all of my focus, all of my energy into her. And it's yet at the same time, it's like, I would want nothing less. It's wild how those two can exist simultaneously, because for pretty much everything else in life, like, that would be a negative statement. Right. But with her, it's like, that's like the most exciting part about it, almost, you know?
Well, and it makes, for me, and I'm sure for you in a way, it makes training a lot harder in ways, but it benefits your training in some ways too. So during the day, you know, when I was years ago, when I was really focused on becoming the best powerlifter that I could be, it's all I thought about. From the second I woke up to the second I went to bed, in the middle of the day at the gym where I used to work at Union Fitness, if I didn't have a client or if I didn't really have a task, I would go lay in the massage room for 15 or 30 minutes and visualize my training session for that day.
That's awesome.
I pictured the weight on the bar. Say it was a deadlift day, and I would picture the weight on the bar. I would take myself to the chalk bowl. I could feel myself chalking my hands. I could, walk over. I could smell the plates, and I could feel the knurling in my hands. and then I'll watch myself execute the lift for however many reps and however many sets I was supposed to do it for that day. Yeah. So when I went into the training session, I had already done it. I didn't even think about it. I just walked over to the bar and picked it up. Fast forward, you have a kid.
Yeah.
You don't think like that anymore. You know, when you're not training, you don't think about training. And part of that's really good, you know, because sometimes we can get consumed with training, and sometimes it has an adverse effect on our training, because you have to be able to turn it off. You have to, or you're going to drive yourself crazy. Yeah. So now, you know, the days that I watch my daughter, it's all I think about all day is watching her. And, you know, my wife gets home and I'm like, shit, man, I got to go train now. Holy shit, I got to lift a lot of weight today. And you feel unprepared for the session. Yeah. And then you're like, well, thank goodness I have this 10-minute drive to the gym. At least I get 10 minutes to think about it. So you're driving to the gym, but then all you're thinking about is your daughter. And then you walk in there, and finally, one rule that I always establish for myself and for my clients, anybody I ever work with, is that the second you walk through the doors, the only thing you're thinking about is training. Nothing else. I don't care what you're thinking about in the parking lot or on your walk to the gym. But the second you open that door, I don't want you thinking about anything else but the task at hand that you have to do today. Because I don't want you to leave that training session and wish that you would have been more focused on the task. So luckily, I always had that on my side, to where when I walked through the gym door, that's all I cared about. And then my focus then was, I'm being as strong as I can to show my daughter that she can be as strong as she can. So it's this weird shift, and it has taken some time to get used to, because I went from the young man's game of only thinking about powerlifting 24/7 to now only thinking about it the hours that you're training. Yeah. And I still don't know how I have responded to that. You know what I mean?
That's got to be a wild shift. It's interesting to hear you say that, because I have never approached powerlifting in that same kind of mentality. But I've talked to you, we talked earlier and a little bit on the show, like powerlifting for me, it's a passion, but for me, it's more of like a therapy, and it's more of like a personal thing for me. Like I've never been about like records or anything like that. Like I want to hit PRs, but it's really like, for me, it's almost more of like an emotional and mental driven thing than it is even like a raw physical strength kind of thing. But there are things that I do and have done in my life that I have approached with that same, like this podcast, this show, for example. Like I've been literally thinking since we wrapped on the episode we recorded for last week, since we wrapped on that episode, I've been thinking about this episode we're recording right now all week. Yeah. Like all week long.
That's right.
I like picture us and I guess I've never realized that I'm doing it until now. Sure. Like when you bring that up, I'm like, oh yeah. Like the stuff that I am most passionate about, I've done that same kind of stuff where it's like, I'm imagining us in the studio. I'm thinking about like not even like the questions I want to ask, but just like the conversations we can have. Because I think those are where the best moments are, is just in the conversations, not even just like, what can I ask you to get the response that we need to hear out of it? It's just like, I love thinking about like the conversations we have, like this right now, like especially when it comes to our daughters, because I can just see a lot of that look in your eye, and I'm like, I see these like looks in your eye. I'm like, I felt that. Yeah, right. Like I felt that, like hardcore. For me, it was, we talk about getting to show them, train, or get them being able to see us either compete or see us train, and being witness to that in some way, shape, or form. I'm so thankful to have Monsters, where we trained earlier. It's a facility, going back to like the kind of the Planet Fitness thing. I don't know if there's a Planet Fitness out there I could bring her into, hand her to pretty much anybody in the space, and then go do my training and feel fully comfortable that she's okay. But I have that at Monsters, which is a impossibly unique thing. Lauren trains there a couple times a week, but she trains with a trainer there, a really good friend of ours, and just a phenomenal coach and athlete in person. And she's been working with Lauren for about a year and a half now, I think. But Lauren brings Lily every single time.
That's cool.
And this trainer, she holds Lily for most of the time they're training. That's cool. But then usually Lily end up getting passed around the gym, Yeah. But it's amazing to like bring her into a space like that where generally they're not very baby friendly places.
Yeah.
And to be able to like trust her safety and well-being in there, like that's a special thing to me. But not only that, but the fact that she gets to witness Lauren training and witness other people training and just like be in that environment, a place of kindness and goodness and strength and so many positive attributes. Like that's so incredible. But one of the big moments as a father that like, obviously you have the moment when your daughter's born, and there's a lot of shift in power and change that happens in that moment for sure. But probably a moment even bigger than that for me was the moment that I first saw her be proud of herself.
Oh, dude.
It like shattered everything I thought I knew about the world. Everything I thought of, it was, I don't even remember I can picture the moment so clearly. I don't know exactly when it happened along the 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, but it happened when she must have been able to sit up by herself because we were sitting on the floor playing. And we had gotten these blocks, they're just like these plastic rubber blocks. And I would stack these blocks up for her. And I was originally trying to show her how to do it. And then she like reached out and like knocked the tower down. And I just said something like, yay, good job.
Yeah.
And she looked at me, she snapped around and looked at me and had this smile on her face and this gleam in her eye. Yeah. And I just remember like, it was like time stopped.
Oh man.
And I was
it's the craziest.
This is my greatest responsibility.
Yeah. And it makes you want to step up in everything else that you're doing.
Dude. Because any single thing I do, I picture that look. And now we can like feed into that and generate that, And it's like, now it's like something we can actually build in her, but that was not even something I'd like intended. But can you like explain for us somebody like what you felt in those, like the first time you ever saw that in your daughter?
Well, one thing it makes you do is it makes you want to protect them as long as possible, which like isn't always the best thing, but like, yes, you want to protect them, but you see the innocence in them. My daughter, I remember the exact moment. We have one of those like play cubes with like all the rails on top and everything. And one day she is sitting on the floor with my wife, and she grabs those rings and just pulls herself up and stands up. And my wife was like flabbergasted. And so she falls down, and my wife sets up the phone and records it. And she picks herself up and she's balancing there for a little bit. And then she falls down, and my wife's like, yay. And, Lydia goes like, and like that smile, dude. And her face got so big that her eyes disappeared because she was smiling so big.
Oh my gosh. And
it kills me. And now like everything that I do every single day, when I was driving out here this morning and, they're asleep at home. When I got up at 4:00.
Yeah.
And I get up and I'm looking on the monitor and I'm seeing them both asleep. And all I wanted to do was stay there with them. Right. And I get in my truck, and it's sleeting and it's snowing and it's raining. Yeah. And I'm pulling out my driveway like, what am I doing? Yeah. And then you get going, and then the split second later, you're like, oh, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah. I'm driving 3 hours to train with these guys, to be able to talk to you, to sit on this podcast, to pass on our word for them. And you play those images of your daughter like smiling and being happy. And then, it's weird because you see them growing up, and you see them as like a 18-year-old graduating high school, dude. And you're like, okay, stop that. Same thing. Stop that. But then it brings you back, it reels you back in, and you realize that the reason that you're going to the gym and trying to be as strong as possible is for you, so you can be that for them. And everything you do, whether it's making money so you can put food on the table, keeping the heat on to take care of them, you realize that everything you're doing is to take care of your family. And that's something that I always had a feeling that I would experience before I was a father, but you can't prepare for that. No. And then when you become a parent, it's the second that kid comes out, you instantly feel it. You're like, you're like, this is it. Yeah. And it's the greatest thing I've ever experienced. Better than any weight I've ever lifted in my entire life.
I agree 100%. Like all the PRs, all the numbers hit in comp, like everything, like it's like nothing even comes close, especially to that moment where because I didn't even realize a baby could express that level of emotion, right. But it's like, I saw that look on her face and it was just not even a question. Like, that's what it is. Like, you see that and some part of your human brain just knows that that's what it is. And it's like, I was so taken aback because I didn't expect it. I didn't know a baby could feel that. But then I see that, I'm like, oh my, like, it was just like, this is my greatest responsibility. And you talk about being able to visualize and picture that smile and how like everything you do is for that. I agree 100%, because to me, I always like, since that moment and since several moments like that since, it's like I always view my day now as like everything I'm doing is an opportunity to earn that smile.
That's right.
Like, and that's what you talk about. That's a big driving piece of all this, because it is so hard to walk away from those moments where, like you say, you see in the monitor and you just see them there together. And it's just like, that is literally the meaning of life in one experience.
But then you realize, that all of the things that you've done in your life have, made you a better person. So you can be a better father.
100%.
And look, I'm not the best father in the world, but who is? Yeah. It's like
nobody's ever going to be perfect.
Yeah, we all are learning as we go. Yeah. But I know that I wouldn't be as good of a father as I am if I didn't do the things that I did, work as hard as I did, be as open-minded to growing in all different aspects, lifting these heavy ass dumb weights every day in the gym, going in the days that you don't want to, getting under the bar, being scared some days to get under the bar. Yeah. You know how that feels.
Dude, that's every single rep.
Yeah.
For me. Like,
and then you do 100%. It. And every time it's funny because it's like, it never changes. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. Like, even the stronger you get, it's like you still are nervous. But then you realize every once in a while, and I think people need to remind themselves of this more often. They need to give themselves more credit and more grace and understand how much better of a person you're becoming each day, and how much better of a lifter that you're becoming, if that's your goal, every single session that you do. And there really are no good days or bad days. There can't be when you're lifting and when you have goals like that. There's just days that you're taking whatever data and information that you collected from that training session and you're applying it. If the day didn't go as you planned, that's okay. Learn from it. If the day went great, why did it go great? So there's no good days and bad days when it's training. You're just taking that information and moving forward. And because of that mindset, going back to being a father, all of those things over the period of time have helped me to be the best father that I can be. And it all makes sense now.
Dude, I agree 100%. I've even said that on the show before. It's like, I feel like everything, I've done in my life, all the personal growth and everything I had to overcome and work through, and everything I've done made me a better person and gave me a greater capacity to love her. And help build her. And so it's like, you just get this whole new, not only do you get a whole new perspective on your life going forward, you get a whole new perspective on your life looking backward as well.
Which is terrifying, looking backwards sometimes, right?
For sure. But I think it's I think that idea, that concept of how everything can change when you get to this point, I think that can actually be a little scary for people sometimes, because if you think about to the person you were, like when you were in that moment of like, powerlifting is everything, and I'm going, like, for that person you were then, it would be a hard, scary thing to think about, like, oh, this is the thing I love more than anything else, but you're telling me that's going to change and that's going to shift. And, you know, I think it's hard for people to approach that from a mental standpoint. I get it. You know, it's when you're that passionate about, you know, whatever you may be doing at the time, it's hard to think that there's something that could happen that could cause that to shift.
Well, I also think, just going along with that, I also think that was part of the reason why my powerlifting career was kind of starting to flatline a little bit.
Really?
Because I knew what my next steps were in life. I got out of that phase of, and look, when I started, I never thought I was going to total 2,000 pounds.
Really?
I never thought I was going to lift the weights that I told myself I wanted to.
Yeah.
And then you get there, and for me anyway, like, I still think I could do more. I think I could be better than I've ever been. But then you start thinking about these other parts of life. And, you know, I was telling Wade today, like, hey man, I missed out on a lot of this stuff. Yeah. You know, when I was taking monthly trips, 6 hours each way to train with the crew at Union Fitness, I was missing some birthday parties and other gatherings, and my friends who were my friends at the time, you know, they were kind of like, hey, what the hell, man, you know? And luckily I had some friends that really stuck with me and supported me. But once I got through that and I realized, like, I wanted to start my own business, I want to be a father, those things started taking up my mental space. And I realized, like, hey, that's what I want to do. But I kept competing because I still like competing. But I just didn't have, like, I didn't have that chip on my shoulder. Because I didn't feel like I had anything to prove anymore. Because I saw where I started, 145 pounds. My first meet, I totaled 1,300. You know, pretty good first meet.
Oh, yeah.
And then I just wanted to get a little incrementally better each time. But I took this chip that I had kind of on my shoulder from growing up, from different experiences, and I would take that into training. And then once I got a total that I never thought I'd have, and once I started focusing, you know, once I got married and I realized I wanted to have a family, that chip kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you don't have that edge that you used to have going into your training sessions. And you're like, you know what? Just because, you know, could I have done 20 more pounds today? Yeah, probably. But you become a little more satisfied. And if your goal is to be the absolute best that you can be, that's not a good mindset. But it's one that I accepted and that I honestly looked forward to. So I think that's kind of how, between that and some small nagging injuries that I was starting to experience, that was kind of what made me fully commit to the shift.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm glad you, like, bring up that perspective and explain that to people. I can definitely understand, see what you're talking about there, about how, like, that chip kind of goes away. But I don't know, I feel like you almost get, I wouldn't call it a chip, but you almost get a whole different type of purpose.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
you do.
To training, because I agree with you, like, training is definitely not the same, but not in a bad way. It's just like, when you're training, there's a difference to it. Because not only am I thinking now, like, about just pushing myself as hard as I can, I've also got to think, like, hey, I've still got to be able to go home and play with my daughter after this. Like, I can't be totally
bigger risk
after this. Yeah. I can't get myself hurt to the point that I, you know, can't take care of her or something. So you think about that kind of stuff. But for me, so I've competed twice now since Lily's been born. And especially this last time in December, it was after this point where, like, she could express this emotion. You know, her eyes can light up when she sees me. You know, she can be proud of herself. She's just a little bit more, because the first time I did it, she was like 2.5 months old, and there's not a lot of emotional response, or like a whole lot of response you get from them. Even though every time you see them, it's still like, it's just like your whole world just melts away. But for me, my sense of purpose and being on the platform, these past 2 meets has been greater than it ever was before.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because, and I wonder, like, if you, I don't know, I've just got, and I know we've not known each other that long. I've not known you that well. I get this feeling though that you're not done 100% competing, even if you never go back to like beat the numbers you've already done. I just get a feeling like there's going to be another thing that draws you to that platform, whether it's your daughter or what, you know, whether it's your coaching or whatever it is. I don't know. I get this weird feeling about it.
Well, it's funny you say that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when I was full bore into competing before I was a father, when I would train, it was with this intensity in my mind. I wouldn't always show it, but in my mind, when I'm getting under a bar or when I'm grabbing a deadlift, I'm saying to myself, "You're the baddest son of a bitch on the planet." even at times you know that's not true.
Yeah.
You know, there's always somebody.
You've got to make yourself believe that.
Yeah,
though.
you do.
Yeah.
And that's what I always told myself. And you know, I think for me it was going through different injuries and finally realizing that, like, I am human. You know, like when I ruptured my bicep off the bone, and coming back from that, my mindset was like, it was humbling.
Yeah.
I couldn't even bench press the bar. Right. Dang. I'm in physical therapy. I remember the first day they gave me a 1 pound dumbbell and I could curl a 1 pound dumbbell.
Yeah.
And it puts you in your place a little bit. Yeah. So going back into training, you're a little more humble and you're like, okay, I respect these weights a little bit more now. So that's kind of where, you know, where that started shifting. And then when I stepped away from competing, everybody told me to go back to what you were saying. They're like, that's still people to this day. You'll be back. You'll be back. You'll be back. And 2 weekends ago, I did this deadlift only fundraiser event.
I remember seeing this video.
Yeah.
I remember this. Yeah.
I did this deadlift fundraiser with some of my training partners and my clients. And I wasn't even going to do it. You know, going into my last meet, I tore my hamstring and I had to do bench only at the meet. And then going into the meet, I strained my pec. So like I only was able to hit my opener. And that's how I walked off of the platform for my last meet. Yeah. So when they told me, hey man, we got this deadlift only meet, do you want to do it? And I was like, I haven't deadlifted anything since in 4 months. You know, I was doing like trap bar deadlift, which I think is a great overlooked exercise, specifically low handle trap bar, but that's another conversation. So I've been doing trap bar deadlifts with like 405 for sets of 6, sets of 8. And then I realized I was going back into, when I do a competition, I don't care if it's a fundraiser or not. I want to do the best that I can.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Given the circumstances and given where I'm at. So I was like, well, I got 3 weeks or 4 weeks. How can I best prepare? So I went and I started doing heavy good mornings, which have always helped me in the past. And then I was doing speed work on my deadlifts. And then going into the deadlift only competition, I had only pulled like 600 pounds, like 585 or 600. And I went to the competition and I was like, man, what am I going to deadlift? I don't know. Do I take this serious? Do I just lay back and have fun? And I was like, no, like pick a goal and stick to it. So I told myself I wanted to deadlift 700 pounds, and not a lot compared to what my best is, but a lot compared to where I was at in that moment. And I go into this meet and I pulled 700 pounds. And I knew I could do it, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, just because I didn't know how my body was going to react, because I had only deadlifted 100 pounds less than that. And out of all the things that I've accomplished on the platform, that was one of the coolest. Yeah. And it wasn't even a legit competition. And I think it was just because I told myself I was done. And then, you know, my training partners came through and they're like, hey, come on, let's do this. And that's what community is all about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'll tell you why, like, because not only like did you pull 700 pounds, it was like a good pull too. Like,
appreciate it.
It looked great. And I remember reading the description to that video and seeing everything that was entailed into it, and like how after that last meet you never really anticipated to do something like that, but then here you are doing it. And it's particularly awesome to hear you describe that as one of your coolest moments on the platform, even though it's not necessarily the heaviest strict weight you've ever lifted before. But the reason I think that is, it's the word we've been, like, it was the theme of 2024 for us, and I think it's going to continue to be the theme going forward, because I've never seen something that can motivate or move or drive somebody harder is the word potential. Is because there was a point earlier in that year, after that meet or after that injury, where I'm sure you thought to yourself that you'd maybe never pull 700 again. And then here you are doing it, not just doing it like it was a really solid, good moving rep. Like if you life or death had to go out there and move more weight, you could have, you know? So it was like, it just gives you a glimpse into your own potential as it stands now. And not just your own potential as it stands now, but your potential to do that kind of lift post-injury, post, you know, kind of thinking of retirement and from the competition space, post becoming a father. After all of these things that, you know, you think maybe would never drive you to do that again, here you can do it. And it gives you that glimpse into, if I can do this, what else can I chase? What else can I go out and make happen? And I think that's a big reason, especially hearing you say that, like that's a big reason why it makes me think that you're not done on the platform. You know, but you know, maybe you never will chase those same numbers you've chased before, but there's other things to chase.
That's right.
And that's why I say those 2 meets that I've done since Lily's been born means so much more to me than anything I've done before. Technically in those meets, I did hit higher numbers than I've ever done before on certain lifts, particularly in the squat, which is one of the main ones I'm chasing right now. But for me, it's not even about that when I think back to it. It's about the mentality I had when I approached the bar, and how it's no longer about like, I have to do this for me. I have to do this to show how strong I can be. It's like everything is so that I can show her how strong I can be. Like earning that smile, earning that pride that she has in herself. And to me, like, and I know you would feel this too, like that is just a whole different world of a driving factor when it comes into this, you know. And that's why I say I've got this obsession about how your mindset and your mentality can approach or can affect not just your training, but your performance on the platform as well. Because I think when you're, like we talked about earlier, when you first discovered coaching, when you're doing it for yourself, it can mean something. When you're doing it to serve others in some way, it can mean so much more, but especially when you're doing it for your daughter. Like I think in today's times with just society, how it is, building strength and pride and belief in herself, like those are 3, you can't give her anything greater, in my opinion. And like you said, if you have those things, they can go out and chase anything. Like they can apply that to literally anything they choose. Like you brought up chess earlier. Like you can use that in chess.
That's it.
You know? Yeah. And so when you get an opportunity to display that for her, like you get it on the platform at a meet, and you get to realize potential that maybe you never thought you'd have again. Man, there's no better feeling than that. So it's really cool to hear you say that, and that's one of your favorite moments on the platform. Yeah,
and I think for me, even looking back when I first started getting into powerlifting, I always wanted to kind of like be the standard of what I wanted to see in others, but also what I wanted others to see that they could do for themselves. So that was a driving force for me as well. Is like every meet that I ever went to, I wanted to walk in there and not with a cocky mindset, but I wanted to be the person that when everybody left the meet and we were done competing, people were like, do you see how that guy handled himself? Yeah. Like that was a professional approach. He was helpful. He was kind. He was humble, but he was focused, and he respected the equipment, respected the judges, but he went out there and he lifted strong ass weights. You can be everything.
Yeah.
You don't have to just be an asshole to be strong. And for me, I always wanted to be the standard across the board. And I think, talking about having a daughter, I want to be the standard for what she looks for in somebody else one day. Yeah. And not settle for anything less. Mm-hmm. So 100%. I want her to be like, hey, you're not on my dad's level. You know what I mean?
100%. Dude, that is so true, because we were talking about that a little bit at lunch too when we were talking to Wade, and I love Wade to death. We could record a whole podcast on just Wade.
A week of podcasts.
Oh man, dude, because he is. I can't speak highly enough of the guy, and I told him this a couple weeks back. Like one of my the thing about Wade that speaks to me the most is that when I look at him, I see myself when I was his age.
Yeah.
But not as I was when I was his age.
Right.
I see myself as what I could have been when I was his age.
Yes.
And that is something very special to me, because I almost feel this responsibility around him of I need to do everything I can to help keep him moving in the direction he's moving in. Because if I had been half as squared away when I was his age as he is now, I can't even imagine, what I'd be achieving now. But
he doesn't realize it.
He doesn't even realize it.
And I think that's normal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
But
I think that's good too.
Yeah.
I think that's good. But it's I think if, I always see if I can just do whatever I can to help keep him on this path, I have this vision of what I know he can be if he just keeps doing what he's doing. But I don't think he even sees that himself, which is fine, and it's good.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of, that's kind of a special thing. You don't always experience that with everyone you meet, and especially everyone you meet at that age. But it was funny, we were talking about having a daughter, and the difference between in responsibility of what it can mean to have a daughter versus have a son. And neither of us have sons, but you can at least, you can speculate. You can speculate. But you bring up this standard of what a man not just can be, but should be. And it's interesting. I wonder if you've had this yet. There's certain people that, since I've had Lily, these certain people will just ask me, I think more jokingly than anything, they're like, you're already terrified of when she starts dating boys and stuff. And I usually just kind of smile or nod or laugh it off or whatever. But when I think about that, I'm like, if I do my job right, I should not be afraid of that at all.
That's it. You shouldn't have to worry about anything, right? And who knows what's going to happen between now and then. Yeah. But although we're worried a little bit, when we sit down and think about it, it's if I continue to be the man that I'm being, and I continue to take care of my family and treat them the way that I'm treating, it ain't going to be no problem for her, because she's going to know, and she's going to be able to weed out all the bullshit that she experiences.
Yeah. That's how I feel 100%. If we can set that standard so high and so strong, and again, that's an infinite game that can drive us to really cool places, because we can always improve upon that standard. We can always grow stronger in our love for her. We can always treat her better. We can always give her more attention and time. We can always do things to give her a better life. All these things that we can do. That can always be an infinite game, and if we build that so high, it hopefully will allow them to, when they get to that point in life, they can just see this is what a man should be. It's not and they wouldn't even have to consider accepting anything less than that. That's
it's funny. It's funny because before you're a dad, you picture yourself cleaning your gun when when they bring over a date.
I'm not going to accept any nonsense.
And you picture yourself giving them this real stern handshake and looking them in the. I don't know if it's ever actually like that.
No.
I mean, we'll find out.
My goal is for them to be way more afraid of her than they are of me.
For sure. Well, it was funny because a couple months ago, going into my last competition, and I rarely show myself without a shirt or anything like that, but I felt like I was in one of the best shapes physically and mentally that I had ever been in. And I put this picture up of myself, in the locker room, and I was shirtless, and it said, my goal now is to be able to terrify anybody that my daughter brings home without even having to say anything.
Yeah.
In this past week, my daughter hit me in the nose and it starts bleeding. And I put a picture of that on Instagram, and multiple people commented, and they're like, hey, I guess now you don't have to train to be able to terrify anybody. She's going to take care of herself. And like, as much joking as that is, it was funny because people remembered that. But, yeah, I mean, I want to teach her to take care of herself. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe not punch people in the nose unless she has to. Don't do that for fun.
Yeah.
But, so that shift has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And what I think is cool is like, when you think about like, when I say that, it's like, I don't want them to actually like be afraid of her, but I want her to be a person that she loves and respects and believes in herself like so strongly that like nobody would ever dare to try to tear that down. Yeah.
And as much as I say, like, if she doesn't want to get into lifting, she doesn't have to. That's 100% true. But there are certain things that you learn about yourself and these certain strengths, physical, psychological, everything that you build through training. And if she even says, hey, I think can you teach me how to lift a weight? Or if she goes and grabs one and starts picking it up, like, I'm going to let her run with it. Oh yeah. Because there's nothing else that I've done in my life. And I've done a lot of really cool stuff. Worked, multiple different jobs growing up that taught me different skills, played different sports that taught me different skills, but lifting weights, competing in powerlifting, training, setting a goal, working your ass off to achieve it, has given me these skills and these qualities that I could not have gained from anything else. So if she chooses to get into lifting, we're going to run with it. Yeah. But if not, I'm still going to make sure that she can experience some of those things. Oh yeah. But there's just some things you can't, there's some things that lifting teaches you that you can't get anywhere else. I agree. I'm a firm believer.
I agree 100% in that. And what I think is cool about it is it can be a daily practice for you but it doesn't have to be your life's greatest passion.
Right.
And like, I would even put myself in that boat to a point. Like, I really love powerlifting. I do. But I don't love powerlifting for powerlifting's sake. I love it for so many of the other things passions I can channel through that. But, there can be somebody who like is an ultimate chess master. Like, that's their greatest passion in life. They can still have a training regimen that helps support that.
As they should.
Yeah, 100%.
Because a lot of training is mental game. Yeah. And it's strengthening your mindset. Yeah. Your different approaches, your strategies, your game plans. Yeah. It carries over to everything.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And so, you can establish that training base in them, and it doesn't even have to be their life's greatest passion, but maybe you can establish at least a habit or some level of a devotional practice around it to where it does fuel whatever they do choose to chase in life, Very so like the day I found out Lauren was pregnant, we were in Columbus. I drove straight to Rogue and bought one of those little kids. I think it's in the other room there. I could show it to you. One of those little kids barbells that you can put like weights on and stuff.
Yeah.
And like,
that's a cool gift to yourself.
Oh yeah. One of those little baby ones is what it is. Yeah.
But it's like hey, I'm a dad.
Oh yeah, exactly. Exactly. 100%. But it's, and I always talk with her like I'm 100% serious, but she knows I'm joking. I have like all of her all-time world records planned out 100%,
Yeah.
But it is just like a joke, but at the same time, it's like, I want to expose her to this as much as possible because, like you say, that there's some things so unique to it that you just can't get anywhere else. And like, I don't like there's a lot of things in life that I may not be able to show her. Like I may not be able to show her how to be a chess master or how to, do certain things that I may just not have experience in, but I have experience in this. This is something I know is 100% beneficial no matter what you choose in life. So if I can give her or show her this as a foundation, I know it'll be net positive for anything else she chases in life.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, I would say that 50% of the people who I coach are parents.
Okay.
And, hopefully they're listening, and we all have the same mindset. And for them, you talk about powerlifting being something that you're really passionate about, but not being like your life's purpose. And for them, that's the cool thing is, you in powerlifting, a lot of people don't realize that a majority of people who compete in powerlifting are just regular people. They're family people. They have a full-time job. There's very few people who only powerlift.
Oh yeah.
There's like only a couple people.
Yeah. Because even like you look at like John Hack, he still has a full-time job.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, as a coach, I understand and I really appreciate the people that I'm working with. And there's something special about working with the people who are parents and the reason behind why they do what they do. Natalie, great person, right?
Phenomenal example.
Has gone through a lot. And seeing her train, when I coach her, I'm coaching her as Natalie, not the powerlifter. Like, yes, I am coaching her to be a better powerlifter, but it's my job as a coach to understand everything else that she has going on. Yeah. So when she's not in the gym, she's a teacher, she's a mom, she's a wife, she has these other responsibilities, and understanding that when I communicate with her, because communication, it's got to be, if you're a coach and you are not constantly in communication with your clients, you're not a coach. I'm sorry. You're a programmer.
You're right. That is exactly what coaching is.
And I don't feel bad saying that because I've been around this long enough that I know the different, the broad spectrum that you get with coaches. But for me, I know that the better I can communicate with her about how she's doing in life and the things that she's going through outside the gym, the better she's going to be in the gym. And that's, that's one of the biggest things that I really, really try to make sure that I always focus on with my clients. The X's and O's, they're important, but they're not going to be as important as making sure that your client is on the right track and is motivated and taking care of themselves outside the gym so that they can be their best self and be locked in like she is inside of the gym. Yeah. So, working with her and other parents, now that I'm one, I can connect better, which is really cool,
Yeah, that's got to be an awesome piece of it. And you're exactly right. Like you would approach like somebody like Natalie, who's got all these other responsibilities throughout the day. You would approach her designing her training and even the way you coach her, you'll approach that so much differently than somebody who would be a full-time powerlifter. That's right. And they have all day to go home and eat and recover and do mobility exercise and like all of these other things. And ultimately, you're going to get more out of Natalie if you take, and you're going to help her get more out of herself if you take all of those other things into consideration versus if you designed a program that consumed so much of her day and impacted so much of her other responsibilities that she just couldn't or wouldn't do it.
That's right. If I had somebody that came to me and they said, I'm going to hire you as a coach. I don't have a full-time job. I don't have any other responsibilities. I just want to powerlift. I could program them like a month or more at a time because as long as all their other metrics during the day are taken care of, hydration, nutrition, stress management, sleep, they're doing the recovery work, I can predict the trends of their training.
Oh yeah.
Right. But that's not realistic.
Yeah. Almost nobody exists in that kind of vacuum. Yeah.
So as a coach, you have to coach on the individual level. Like I was saying, you have to know them as the individual because that's going to help you coach and program them weekly. And there's so much that can happen week to week. Yeah. I get those texts sometimes. It's like, Coach, I slept 2 hours last night. Yeah. And I I've been feeling, I've been stressed, so I haven't been eating like I'm supposed to. How many coaches out there would say potentially just go try it anyway. Yeah. See how it goes. It's like, see how it goes.
Yeah.
Let's say they do accomplish it. It's going to be, it might be hard. And then they're in their own head. And then the problem still isn't taken care of. Yeah. So that's when you have to adjust, and you have to be able to have those conversations and even jump on a quick phone call after the session, which I do all the time. It's like, hey, tell me what's going on. How can we adjust this to get you back on track? That has to be present as a coach, and that's what I've based my business off of, is communication first, understanding the person, then treat them as the athlete.
I think that's a fantastic perspective to take, because like you brought up in that specific scenario, if you went ahead and had them go in and do that, it's going to come back with a negative impact somewhere along the line, and like you say, even if they hit it, well, maybe it wears them out even more to the point that, they become overtrained, or their CNS becomes fried, or things like that. And you have to take this whole view of the person and be able to understand what their ultimate goal is. Because there's going to be a lot of people like me as an athlete. Like I've got one big number goal I want to hit right now, but really for me, it's just about stepping on that platform and approaching something impossible, something I shouldn't be able to do, and putting myself in that position to face it, get under that bar, take that weight, and then go for it. Like for me, I've said this on the show before, every part of, take squatting, for example. For me, success in that lift is hitting depth. And I don't care what happens after. It's fun to come back up and get the white lights and everything, but I could go out and say when I attempt 500 this summer, I could go out and miss it 3 times. And I'm fine with that as long as I faced that fear. I got under that bar and I took it to depth. And I put myself fully in the position of facing that impossible. As long as I did that, and I feel confident that I did everything else in my power to be able to perform in that situation, then I'm good with it. And because to me, it's all about building that mentality, building that emotional and spiritual strength, and physical strength as well. But that's not my primary driver. So for me as an athlete, I'm never going to care about those numbers as much as I care about what I'm building within myself from it. And so as a coach, you have to be able to think about, what is your athlete's goal? Maybe they're not trying to break a national record. Maybe they're not trying to break a world record. Maybe they're just trying to be strong for themselves and their family. And I would imagine you'd program that a lot differently and you'd adapt to the situations that come up a lot differently than if you had an athlete who truly was wanting to take those all-time world records or national records, or place first at the meet, or hit a certain DOTS goal, things like that.
Yeah, and at the same time, regardless of what end of the spectrum you're on, whether you're doing this for yourself or you're doing it because you want to be one of the top competitors around, there are certain things that have to be a standard. And sometimes, I talked about having those conversations with my clients. Sometimes those conversations go, hey, we simply just need to toughen up. Yeah. Like having a rough night and being sick and maybe going through something really challenging, that throwing your training off, that's one thing. That's when we can adjust the programming to get you back on track. Going into the gym and saying you just, it was a rough day at work and I'm not feeling really focused or driven right now. I'm going to tell you to suck it up. Yeah. I'm going to tell you to get the shit done that you told yourself you wanted to accomplish. So that's another part of it. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're doing it for yourself or because you want to be one of the best. You got to go in sometimes and do shit that you don't want to do when you don't want to do it because you told yourself that you wanted to accomplish it. So that's another end of the spectrum, right? That's
a really good point. I'm glad because that's got to be a delicate balance between.
You choose your words wisely, but that's the thing is like, I felt like I was kind of a hybrid growing up, getting into powerlifting because I was an emotional person, but I was also very competitive. So I combined the two, and I could coach myself because I was my own experiment,
Yeah.
I could coach myself depending on how I was feeling, right? Some days I would say, Kurt, just shut up and do it and toughen up and get under the damn bar. And other days I could say, hey man, it's all good. You've gone through a lot recently. Let's take a step back. Let's readjust and let's move forward. So I think going through that and coaching myself that way, I was able to coach other people that way from getting to know them. You got to understand what they respond to and their level of coachability. You can't just coach everybody the same.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say there's times you got to hold somebody's hand, but there's times you got to let people know that you're there with them. And then there's times you say, I'm done holding your hand. Get your ass to work because you said you wanted to do this. And it's up and down battle. It's the most challenging part, but it's the most rewarding.
It is such an art. And really that's what you're describing there. That's leadership. Like that's 100% leadership. Like that's one of my main roles I have to do in my main job I've had now for the last 8 months. And that's been a huge shift for me, but it's been so infinitely rewarding. And I've learned so much about myself and other people. And there's so much to gain from that as well. And I'd never considered that before, that there's a massive leadership aspect to coaching as well, because like you're in the business, like it's kind of funny I'm saying this now, because with Impossible Performance, what we do here, we like to tell people, because it's kind of weird. We do a lot of things. Like we have some media side to what we do, but we have this whole messaging and mindset side that we do as well. Like I don't necessarily consider us a media company. So we had a hard time like defining like who we are, what we do. And we ended up just deciding that we're in the business of human potential.
Love it.
But as a coach, that's a lot of what you're doing day to day. Like you not only have a responsibility to yourself, but also to your athlete to help them pull like that's what you're getting paid to do.
That's right.
You're getting paid to help them achieve their highest potential. Potential maybe they never even saw in themselves. And so there's more to balance there than just programming. Like we're not computers. And that's what you say, like you can't just be a programmer. Because yes, in a perfect vacuum you could. If you had an athlete that would respond to every single rep, every single set, every single pound you prescribed them, they did it without fail. They ate every meal without fail. They did every recovery session without fail.
That's easy.
Yeah.
That's
like,
easy.
Then it would be no fun.
Right.
I feel like, because then you just write it out and you're like, okay, well that's done.
Get back to it later.
There's no challenge to it. There's no ebb and flow. There's no art. There's no growth to find in that. So I love that you bring up that side of coaching, because that's never something I've considered about it before. Yeah.
And you talk about leadership, and that was something that, I told you that Jaden and I both know Paul O'Neill very, very well. And Paul's been a great mentor to me. And we were recently talking about leadership on our group call that we do every Thursday. And he was like, tell me what leadership means to you guys. And when you really have to sit and think about it, there's so many possibilities. But one thing that he said that really resonated with me was leadership means showing them what's possible. And I realized that a lot of times when I go in and train, or when I post the content that I post of me lifting, it is to show my clients what can be done, because they know me. I've worked with them long enough, and through the connection that we have, they know that I'm just a regular guy, right? And I know they're just regular people as well, and we're searching for the same goal. So then when they see me go through these things, but then they still see me, achieve the things that I do in my training sessions, whether it's squatting something for 25 reps or hitting a heavy single, they see it and they're like, I got that. I can do that. And I trust this guy, because he's walking the walk with me. And I think that's a big part of leadership. Oh yeah. So that's why I'll never be done lifting, because I want to show them what they can do.
100%. And I think that is one of the most powerful pieces, because you want, just like we talked about with our daughters, you want to set a standard so high that they accept nothing less. That's honestly, thinking about it now, like that's true in raising our daughters, but that's true for the people you coach and the people that follow us and everybody that you impact as well. Like as a coach, you have an opportunity to not just guide them and help them find their own potential, but you can show them, or you can create for them a standard that they can hold themselves accountable to. And when you have that, man, that's so much higher of a responsibility.
It really is.
Because I've found, at least for myself, I can let myself down so much easier than I can let other people down. And especially like Lily, like I feel like I could never want to fail her. I feel like I can't imagine any way I could let that happen. Although I make mistakes on a daily basis, you know, but I used to view that as such a negative thing. Like, why would I let myself down before I let other people down? In the past couple of years, I've been able to like flip that around and actually gain a lot more power and drive from that, though. Like use that, leverage that, put yourself in situations where you've got to be that standard for other people. Yeah. You've got to perform because you can't let them down. You know, you've got to perform because you need to show them the potential they have in themselves. And I don't know if that's right or wrong or not, but I've found that is an impossibly powerful thing.
100%. And the thing is, you know, you talk about like letting yourself down. If you haven't, I don't think you're trying hard enough.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
So, but there's, you know, I think sometimes it's okay to let yourself down with certain things so that you can learn from it, so that you don't make whatever, if it was a mistake, you don't make that mistake for other people, or you learn that lesson so that you can help, you know, other people through a similar situation. We have to be, and I think more people need to, instead of trying to be perfect all the time, and instead of trying to do the right things, be okay with messing up. Be your own test subject. Learn right from wrong and be better from it. So you can give that to somebody else who you care about, man. I think that's the biggest thing, whether it's lifting weights or whether it's whatever else in life, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that brings us kind of full circle to what we discussed at the beginning. You know, you talked about how there's really no like good or bad people in the space of training or life, or there's no good or bad philosophies, and there's something you can learn from everybody. I think you can apply that to yourself in every success and every failure, you know, in every outcome. There's good you can find there, even if it's what not to do.
That's right.
You know, and in that way, if you approach every circumstance of your life with that kind of mentality, you're going to drive yourself forward. You're going to raise that standard higher, whether it's a success or a failure or whatever it may be. So I think that you can't really have much more powerful than that level of mentality when you approach, whether it's training or life or parenting or coaching or whatever it is you may do. If you're always moving forward, always raising that standard, always setting that bar, and always learning and growing from that, you're going to create net positive that compounded 10, 20 years down the road.
That's it.
You know, you'll be in a spot you couldn't have even imagined.
That's it. And then when you think about, if you can impact one person and that person goes and impacts somebody else, and you think about how that spreads over time, you'll never see that come back. Yeah. But you'll know that's the goal. Yeah. That's the goal for sure.
Yeah. I agree 100%, man. Well, dude, I think we could sit here and keep talking for hours and hours and hours. Yeah, I agree 100%. Man, I can't thank you enough. We're honored to bring you and your perspective and your message and your mindset on this show. I can't thank you enough for being here, for doing this with us, having this conversation.
It was something I've been looking forward to.
Oh, man.
And I'm just so thankful and appreciative that you asked me to come out.
Dude.
And you got an awesome crew there at the gym too. And I hope that I hope my truck still has plenty more miles in it that I can get back here a few more times.
Yeah, we'd absolutely love that, man. Maybe we'll have to make a road trip up to Pittsburgh.
I think you guys would like Pittsburgh. We've
been talking about it. Well, we actually we come up to Pittsburgh not infrequently because we run the Pittsburgh Marathon.
Oh yeah,
that's a new thing we've started doing every year, because they offer something called a marathon relay, where basically you take a full marathon, divided them up amongst, I think it's 5 people.
Yep.
And that was one of the first things we did. We got to do with Natalie and Leo last year, and it just ended up being one of the most amazingly impactful experiences for us and for them for so many reasons that we just kept coming back every year. So it definitely holds a special place in our hearts.
You guys are always welcome to the gym too.
Yeah, we appreciate it, man. Yeah. We'll definitely have to make that happen. Definitely. Guys, we appreciate you being here to listen along. If you guys want to learn more from Curtis or what he's doing, or reach out to him for potential coaching opportunities, where's the best place they can find you? Yeah,
you can find me on Instagram at CurtisMiller_Ironbound. And through there, you'll see a link to my website and my coaching business, Ironbound Strength, my email address. Send me a DM. Ask any questions, send me videos. I will help you with anything that I have the potential to help you with.
Yeah, and we appreciate that, man. We'll throw all that in the show notes. So everybody, cool. If you guys want to learn more about that or find those links or anything, they'll all be in the podcast description or show notes, depending on whatever platform you're on. But dude, I really love this conversation. I can't tell you how much I learned, not just from this conversation specifically, but from the whole day of like being around you, seeing your training, seeing your approach to not just training, but life in general, man. I truly appreciate it. I've learned so much from you today. And what's always wild to me is like, we didn't even end up talking about powerlifting all that much.
Right.
But I think what encapsulates all this the most is one of the very first things you said at the gym this morning when we were training is that you said powerlifting can't just be powerlifting. Like you've got to have something more to it than that. And I think you're a living perfect example of that, because
appreciate that.
It's not just powerlifting for you. It's not just numbers. It's how can I help people? How can I be a better father? How can I be a better mentor and coach? How can I be better in every aspect of my life and set a higher standard? And I can do all of that through this sport.
That's it.
That you've generated so much passion and love for.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That means a lot, Matt.
Dude, it's just what I see 100% when I look at you. Now that's
Thanks, man.
An awesome, inspiring thing to be able to witness. Thanks. So guys, if you got something out of this episode, which we undoubtedly know you did, because we're honored to bring so many incredible guests on this show, you know the number one thing we ask for you that you can help us more than anything else is help to share this with someone you know that you think it could also help. Because at the end of the day, that is how we attain our mission and our vision that we read at the beginning and end of every single podcast episode, is by spreading this message, spreading these mindsets, spreading these stories. Because one thing we've learned from everything we do is that while there's so much uniqueness to every story and every experience for every person, at the same time, there's also so much similarity and so much that you can learn from being exposed to somebody else's mission and message and mindset. And as Curtis told us, there's something you can learn from every single person. And as you guys have learned throughout the course of this episode, there is an awful lot you can learn from Curtis. And I know you've got a really awesome opportunity coming up soon to be on Dave Tate's Table Talk, correct? So when does that happen, and when can people look out for that?
Yeah, that's going to be, I'm going up there, I believe April 22nd.
Okay.
And we're going to film that. And then I'm not sure when it will be released, but you know, that's something I've been dreaming about for a very, very long time. And now that that's kind of happening, it kind of seems a little unreal, you know what I mean?
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be so surreal. I'm sure, especially when you go up there and train. And you said you're going to pull an all-time
my
PR.
goal, you know, right now now that I'm not competing.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta play these games with yourself, and you gotta find something else that drives you in these new goals. And I haven't hit a all-time deadlift PR in probably 4 years, maybe 5. And so I think I'm gonna follow along my training. I'm going to start gearing it towards trying to hit an all-time PR of 810 pounds.
There we go.
When I go up to Elite. So if it happens, that'd be awesome. If not, I'm still going to work my ass off trying to get there.
You'll love the process.
That's
yeah.
right.
Dude, I love that. And I cannot wait for the day I open up that Instagram app and I see a video of Curtis Miller deadlifting 810 pounds, man. Yeah. That's going to be incredible. Yeah. And it's going to be awesome to think back on this moment that we recorded this here, knowing that it's coming in the future.
Yeah.
So dude, I really appreciate it. Guys, we appreciate you listening along, sharing the episode, everything you do to help us and support us. And as always, at Impossible Performance, we are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. Thank you for listening, and as always, be impossible.